Thank you for the introduction. Hello, my name is Zainab Al Ali, and I am the head of Outreach and Stakeholder Relations at Masdar Abu Dhabi Renewable Energy Company. UAE and Masdar recognize that young people are our future. Their education and engagement is crucial for the prosperity of our world. One of our greatest challenges is to ensure that they are equipped with the skills that they need to succeed in the future. A key to engaging young people is, of course, to encourage and provide them with a sense of empowerment. One such example of a dedicated and impressive young leader is our guest today. It's my pleasure to be joined by Jayathma Wickramanayake, the UN Secretary General's Envoy in Youth. Jayathma was appointed in 2017 when she was 26 years old, in an effort to make the UN home to the youth of the world. She continues to lead the youth agenda for the UN, working to engage the 1.8 billion young people around the world, inspiring them to unleash their full potential. Today, she will be sharing with us her thoughts on how governments better engage young people, the involvement of youth in our green recovery, and the skills necessary for the digital future. Without further ado, let's get started. Welcome to Jayathma. I'm truly delighted to be in conversation with you today, addressing a topic close to both of our hearts.
Thank you, Zainab. Thank you very much for having me.
It's our pleasure. But Jayathma, before we start our conversation, being a global advocate for youth, what inspired you to take such a responsibility, and what can you tell us about your journey?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I hope and wish that those who are joining us today are safe and healthy, both physically and mentally, because I know the pandemic and these long months of isolation, quarantine, social distancing has left all of us a little bit drained. But I hope that through this forum that you are able to renew your ideas and re-energize towards our journey to 2030 to achieve the sustainable development goals. My journey actually starts from Sri Lanka, where I was born. I was born into a country that went through a conflict. My country was in a war for 30 years. So I was born into a country that was going through a war, and I lived 19 years of my life in a country affected by war. So my journey really, I think, shaped seeing the detrimental effects of the war on people, on minorities, particularly understanding the intersection between human rights, peace and security, and development, and the massive challenges that these together poses for countries that are really trying to resolve those issues with massive populations of young people as a part of their demography and population. And what inspired me to then take action is to really know we as youth and we as future generations should not repeat the same mistakes of the past generations. So I've done a number of things back home, like founding a youth organization named Hashtag Generation that worked on civic and political participation of young people. I've been involved in making some important policies that affected young people in my country, like the National Youth Policy, the National Youth Employment Action Plan, and non-communicable disease prevention work back home. And all of this kind of culminated into where I am today as the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. And through this job, I act as an advisor and a representative to the UN Secretary General on issues pertaining to young people. And one of my biggest responsibilities now within the UN is to actually bring the entire UN system together. We have more than 50 different UN agencies like, UNICEF or UNDP, WHO, bring them all together. And we work in 131 countries and bring all those 131 countries together and to implement the Secretary General's vision for youth, which is Youth 2030, the UN's youth strategy. So that is a little bit about my past and my present.
What an impressive work, and I'm sure that we'll be working together as well to achieve your objective and vision. Jayatma, in your opinion, how governments and corporations can empower youth to advance the sustainability agenda and build a more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable future.
Yes, I mean, I think at this point of time, we cannot really talk about the SDG agenda without talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and the impacts that it has had on the trajectory that we were on to achieve the SDGs. Were we on time to achieve all the targets and goals? Of course, that is questionable, but we were at least on the right path and on the right direction to 2030. But the pandemic really kind of threw things into a different direction. Now there are so many millions of people merely thinking about survival, not about thriving in a sustainable society that we would create. And young people within this context are disproportionately affected. The past few months of the COVID-19 restrictions made 1.6 billion children and young people miss out on school. 1 in 6 young people have lost their employment. The amounts of gender-based violence we see in homes, in communities have increased. This means that particularly in impoverished communities, child marriages, female genital mutilation, girls' access to education particularly are being threatened and are being threatened in the sense that it would reverse the progress that we actually made in the past couple of decades. So what can governments and corporations do to support young people in this particular situation of a pandemic that actually has us put within different layers of barriers to stop us from achieving the SDG goals? I think number one is investments. Governments, corporations need to take more seriously investing in young people, investing in education that is accessible to all young people. We know that the world has now switched to virtual online, right? That's why we are speaking like this. Otherwise we would have been maybe together in Abu Dhabi having this conversation in person. But it's a privilege to be able to have access to a computer, to be able to have access to a functioning internet connection, and many young people do not have that. So investments in education, but accessible education through internet, through infrastructure, employment opportunities. We know that the only way to empower a young person economically is to be able to give them decent jobs. So not just any jobs, not just any sector, not just any level of job, but decent, dignified jobs that gives young people meaning and for them to be able to contribute to the development of not just themselves, but their countries as well. So I think investments are extremely important. And number two is opportunities for participation. We know that whatever the decisions governments and corporations take today are going to affect decades to come and the future of the generations in the decades to come. Those, I would say, and mind my language, older people who are making those decisions today might not even live in the future to live with the repercussions of those decisions which are being made today in 25 years, in 30 years. So it's utmost important that we have young people at the decision making table when decisions are being taken about our economy, about our education systems, about our planet, that their voices and their perspectives are heard, because they're the ones who will drive this change in the years to come, and they're the ones who will also live with the repercussions of those changes we are implementing today.
Thank you, Jayathma. I really agree with you that investing in education and investing in providing the right access and tools with giving the youth the ability and the opportunity for effective participations are really key factors in terms of building more inclusive and resilient sustainable future. As the demand for a digital and soft human skills continue to rise, how can we ensure that young people are equipped and empowered to combat the world's challenges, particularly the threat of climate change?
Yes, I mean, I think our entire world is in an educational crisis. And the root cause for the challenge that you're speaking about, I think, is largely due to that educational crisis. We still teach young people what was important during the third industrial revolution, how to be more effective, productive, how to work in a particular sector, how to grow in a particular sector, without really understanding that we are now moving towards a fourth industrial revolution that is largely driven by technology, that is largely driven by skills, as you said, and not necessarily by sectors and levels of employment like we used to so many years ago. But this transformation in education has not yet happened. And I think that needs to come from a place where you don't teach students subjects in school, but rather you teach them skills, soft, transferable, flexible skills that can help them grow into different levels and types of employment. There is the World Economic Forum research that is being done, which says half of the students in primary school today will graduate into jobs that doesn't even exist today. Our world is changing so fast and so rapid, and we need to be able to teach young people how to learn, because it's also less likely, like in our parents' generation, if you're a teacher, 35 years of your career, you'll be a teacher. But that's going to change for the next generations. You're likely to have 2-3 different careers within your lifespan, and you need to be able to upskill yourself, reskill yourself, learn new technologies, learn new sectors, learn about new developments. And that only comes with a skill of lifelong learning and to be able to learn. So we really need to rethink the way that we teach young people. One of the examples that I give, even though it may not be 100% relevant, is my job, right? A lot of people ask, so how did you become the envoy? And what did you do to become the envoy? And I usually say nothing, because when I was in school, my job didn't even exist, right? When I was in university, even my job didn't exist. And my job started to come into life because of the changing nature of the demographics of our world, and there was a need for the UN to better engage with young people. So the only thing that made me qualified for this job is that I had the skills necessary to be able to communicate, to be able to do the advocacy that is needed for this role, and to be able to understand the complex system of the United Nations, to be able to get work done through that system. I've never studied youth development. I learned it by experience. There was no training program that gave me the skills to navigate the complex bureaucracy of the UN system. That, of course, also I had to learn through the extracurricular work that I did back at school. And I think I was just a lucky person to be able to get those knowledge and experiences through different means, because there was no school or academy that could prepare me for this job. And I really think that this is going to be the future for so many young people, millions of young people in the years to come. So flexible, adaptable, transferable skills and lifelong learning, I think that is going to be the recipe for success to live in a rapidly changing world.
Thank you so much. I think that youth will really use those recipes, and they will not stop learning, reskilling and upskilling themselves. Now, my last question relates to COVID-19 situation and that we still find ourselves in. How can we involve youth in the COVID-19 green recovery within the context of the UN Sustainable Development Goals?
One of the things that young people have been saying since the beginning of the pandemic is to look at the pandemic as an opportunity for transformation. We've lost so many jobs during the pandemic, and governments, corporations will have to create new jobs going forward to reabsorb these young people into their economies, into the labor force, into their workforces. And when that transition happens, there is an opportunity to make that transition a greener, a sustainable transition. I've had conversations with young people from the African continent who have told me, if I'm given an opportunity to work in a coal mine and in a renewable energy plant, I will take the opportunity to work in a renewable energy plant because I want a dignified job. I don't want a job that makes me feel like I'm contributing to catastrophic climate change in the world, where I can actually have the opportunity to put my physical energy, my mental energy, my skills, my knowledge into actually making our world a better place. So there is no doubt that young people do understand the adverse effects of climate change, the contributions of humans to create those adverse impacts of climate change, and to be able to be the generation that brings the solutions. But oftentimes young people don't have the power to make decisions that could actually help them get there. And this is why I think it's so important that policymakers listen to the voices of young people. You see them protesting on the streets demanding for climate action. You see them in the halls of congresses and parliaments. In the UN, you see so many young people coming, lobbying, fighting, advocating for better and bigger changes in the climate action agenda, so that we really translate the Paris Agreement and the many instruments that we have in our hands into concrete actions on the ground. So for an example, next year during the COP meeting, the Conference of the Parties, who will come together to agree on the next steps of the implementation of the Paris Agreement, we are bringing hundreds of young people to that meeting. We want their voices to be heard. We just don't want young people to be limited to a youth forum or a youth event. We need them in the actual rooms where the business happens. We need them in the actual rooms where the decisions are going to be made. So this generation of young people who are really conscious about climate change and who are really willing to put things at stake to take action about climate change, they need to be brought into these rooms. And that can be done in a way that it is intergenerational, that it serves justice to the generations who are going to be most affected by the changes that we are making today. And just to link this to my previous answer, Zainab, I think climate education also has a huge role to play in this. Currently, Italy is the only country who has made climate education mandatory for young people in schools. But I think everywhere in the world, climate education should be made mandatory for young people. We need to understand the dynamics of the world that we live in. We need to be able to understand what are the big factors that are causing climate change effects, and to be able to organize ourselves and to practice in our day-to-day lives the lifestyle that does not feed overconsumption and production, but a lifestyle that really contributes to making our planet healthy and livable, and to also elect and support leaders politically who are supporting this type of transition when we go forward.
Jayathma, you said it rightfully. I think youth have the power to make a positive change. And now that brings us to the end of this session. Thank you so much, Jayathma, for giving us your time and your insight, which I'm sure will offer lasting inspiration to our audience today.
Thank you very much for having me, Zainab.
Pleasure. Stay safe, everyone.